And that's about it.
Thank you, Kalida. Wonderful. I sure hope people who are participating are connecting in differently to all the different partners we've had speaking so far. So we're moving on to a different section of the webinar here, and I'm going to introduce my colleague at OPHA, who is Roberta Timothy. Roberta currently works at OPHA co-coordinating the CLiP project, and specifically she's leading the literature review work, some research connected with that, which is she's going to mostly speak on in the next 10 minutes. And she's also developing the curriculum and coordinating the two-day learning institute, which you're going to hear more about in the final part of the webinar. That's happening in the fall. Roberta brings to our project team such strong leadership in terms of anti-oppressive practice and also a depth of perspective based on the range that she works as a community organizer, volunteer, and based as a therapist, a trainer, group facilitator, researcher, professor, and clinical supervisor. So I'm passing it on to Roberta, and Stephanie, you're doing slides, am I right?
Yes. Thanks,
Okay.
Joanne. Thank you, and thanks for welcome everybody. Good morning. In my presentation today, I will focus on the following aspects. First, I will provide background information concerning my involvement in the project, the literature review, and the survey. Secondly, I will outline some aspects of the methodology used in the literature review. Thirdly, I will discuss some preliminary findings of the literature review and an update on the survey we are currently undertaking. Finally, I will conclude my presentation by discussing the next steps. I would like to start my presentation by locating myself in the research and the project. I identify as an African diasporic woman from a working class background, daughter of immigrants via the Caribbean, mother of two, living and resisting with a visual disability in Turtle Island, Canada. I'm a researcher, community organizer, educator, and therapist, as you said, with over 25 years of intersectional anti-oppression praxis and experience. I'm very excited at the opportunity to share some of the preliminary results of the literature review with you today. I believe that this is an important step in engaging community members in discussions about the importance of utilizing an anti-oppression, equitable, collaborative leadership framework in your partnerships and networks in the not-for-profit sector. So why did we conduct the literature review? To find materials and resources that could assist individuals and organizations in developing and sustaining equitable anti-oppression collaborative leadership frameworks to support partnerships and networks from an inclusive framework. Also, to outline any gaps in the literature by highlighting existing community-based collaborative partnerships and networks known and unknown. This would help to identify the work already being done. In terms of methodology, I followed a scoping review methodology from an anti-oppression perspective. Over 400 documents have been reviewed. The scoping review aimed at evaluating the status of inclusive, equitable, and collaborative leadership frameworks, models, and practices across different disciplines, particularly in relation to the non-for-profit sector. Particular attention has been paid to existing policies that promote diversity and inclusion in governance, volunteer management, and delivery of services. Additionally, the overall implementation of anti-oppression practices in collaborative organizational processes within the not-for-profit sector are being examined. In the scoping review, eligible papers and documents were identified using explicit search strategies across a range of data sources. I determined specific exclusion criteria, and the final papers and documents selected for inclusion have been read in full, and data has been extracted using a form developed specifically for the scoping review. Currently, an environmental scan is being undertaken to expand the gathering of relevant information not available via the scoping review. This scan consists of an online survey and or face-to-face interviews with key informants. In terms of preliminary findings, I found that collaborative leadership is an area of interest in private and not-for-profit sectors. Collaboration is an important theme in mainstream business management literature, appearing as an important requirement for sustainability in the private sector, particularly in the current global context. Collaboration is also an important theme in not-for-profit organizations and was often found in materials related to collaborative community research published by academics. These materials, however, were not often found in mainstream literature. I found that there was a substantial amount of materials and resources relate to equitable collaboration. However, it appears that due to limited resources, important materials are shared only among community partners and networks. Overall, the main theme found in the scoping review can be broken down into the following areas, 4 areas. 1, defining collaborative leadership. 2, collaborative learning, collaborative leadership in education, 3, collaborative leadership in health, interprofessional collaboration, and 4, collaborative equitable leadership and anti-oppression. Concerning how it is defined and characterized, the findings pointed out that collaborative leadership creates an inclusive environment that energizes teams and releases creativity, that it falls somewhere between transactional and symbiotic interactions and partnerships, that too much collaboration may interfere with effective operations of the partners involved, that it overlaps with the concept of distributed leadership, and it involves individual characteristics, behaviors, and styles, as well as organizational interactions. The literature findings also pointed out that collaborative leadership requires conflict resolution skills, which include understanding relationships to conflict, understanding the needs of groups, ability to hold difficult conversations, finding the greater good, as well as mediating in other people's conflict. A second relevant theme in the literature related to collaborative learning and collaborative leadership in education. More specifically, collaborative leadership and learning appeared as a core element in transformative education, anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-homophobic education, as well as in experiential and art-based pedagogies. A third area in the literature concerned collaborative leadership in health interprofessional collaboration. This relates to decision-making processes and service delivery in healthcare. The literature findings indicated that collaborative leadership and interprofessional collaboration has been demonstrated to promote better outcomes in patient care. Additionally, the literature indicated that this requires significant changes in functioning at the organizational, team, and personal professional levels. Internationally, for example, in the work of the World Health Organization, there appears to be significant interest in expanding this area of knowledge. A fourth theme in the literature review concerned collaborative equitable leadership and anti-oppression. In this regard, the literature indicated that there is a tension between the traditional, quote-unquote, individualistic business management literature focused on leadership and emerging elaborations on collaborative equitable leadership, which requires a paradigm shift. Overall, the search in relation to equitable leadership in this area produced limited results. The literature available discusses that prioritizing the dismantlement of gender-based power imbalance may result in dismissing intersecting oppressions on the basis of race, culture, socioeconomic status, and other social systemic differences. Additionally, it was pointed out in the literature that the representation and accountability community is a central element of collaborative equitable leadership and anti-oppression. The literature also indicated that this requires understanding of diverse positionality on the basis of intersecting factors of identity and systems of dominance in a macro-social and personal context. Additionally, the literature discussed how resistance and internal power are central to disrupting and validating systemic messages. In the literature, I found critiques of the notion of leaders versus followers, suggesting the use of new paradigms and language to represent equitable leadership, in this case, co-action or acting together. It was suggested that this concept looks at every member in the organization as a cooperative leader. Co-action, an author wrote, requires resistance of oppressions, collaborating, attending to processes and not only outcomes, deconstruction of power hierarchies, and establishing more egalitarian relationships. Additional elements of collaborative leadership and anti-oppression related to the importance of being socio-politically sensitive, looking at the personal as political, recognizing the connection between the personal experiences and interpersonal interactions in the socio-political systems. The literature review findings express that some of these values may be particularly challenging to implement in organizations valuing numerical productivity. I would like to briefly mention the following as examples of toolkits and examples, and these can be found on the CLiP website. In terms of anti-oppression collaborative leadership toolkits, Springtide produced the Integrated Anti-Oppression Framework for Reviewing and Developing Policy, a toolkit for community organizations which can be found, and the website will be given later. Avenue has produced a toolkit in 2015 entitled Artful Anti-Oppression, a toolkit for critical and creative change makers. From the U.S., the Center for Story-Based Strategy constitutes another example of organizational collaborative anti-oppression policy and principles. The North Etobicoke Local Immigration Partnership also has a toolkit. In terms of the survey currently being undertaken, a brief questionnaire has been developed and distributed online to a wide audience, particularly targeting the not-for-profit sector and individuals with expertise in the area of inclusive, equitable, and collaborative leadership in the non-for-profit sector. The information gathered through this questionnaire will be analyzed and summarized, and relevant findings, including documents, will be integrated into the scoping review. I will determine if any findings warrant an interview follow-up. We'd value hearing your perspective and learning from your experience. This survey will help us collect information about your policies and practices, successes and challenges, and the types of enablers, tools, and resources that have helped support your work. We ask that you and or a member of your team complete this survey by the end of the day on Monday, June 30th. This is kind of a plug for the survey. Using this link, fluidsurveys.com, surveys, OHP, collaborative leadership. They'll give you the real link. All answers will remain confidential and anonymous. We will only report data in an aggregate form. In conclusion, I would like to invite you to complete the Key Informant survey if you haven't already, and to also stay tuned as we will release in the coming weeks more specifics about the release of the literature review and survey final report, as well as our Learning Institute. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Roberta. Did you breathe? That was great, and certainly when the report is out, those who like to go in depth will be able to go in depth to that. But I'm just so excited to hear the highlights from you today. And I grabbed onto the word co-action because in listening to Hanifa and Suzanne, that's what we were hearing, right? Like co-action and how to, we're all in different locales, we're all with different communities in different places, different people, but that effort towards moving towards co-action and figuring that out is something that I think we all have in common. And just in kind of wrap up as well, Khalida, I know you always highlight the cultural humility piece, and it also, for me, has made a big difference just being aware of that piece and growing my humility. And certainly that is a key piece for those of us when we have power and privilege to bring the humility forward when we're seeking co-action with others. So this kind of gets us through, you're getting to know some of the people, some of the key people involved with the CLiP project and the diverse and overlapping and interweaving efforts that we're doing. So